Hey everyone, welcome back to the Black Mental Wellness Lounge. Brandon Johnson. I'm so excited to continue these conversations, and thank you for everybody who was engaged with the Black Youth Suicide Prevention Week, who tapped into the infographics, the videos, all the things that we put together with that. I'm definitely going to be releasing the link so anybody can download those infographics whenever they want, they want to share it with somebody. I definitely want to make sure everybody has access to that. So thank you all so much. I appreciate all the engagement, all the support with that. Please share it with people. We want people to get the info, people to get the information, know where the resources are. That's the whole point of doing something like that. And so today is basically an extension of that, kind of continuing with everything we did that week, just making sure people are tapped into where there is information and where people are working on this topic. And so with that, I want to bring up my auntie in this space. We had you on before. I'm excited to have you back, and I wanted to get into this conversation around data, but just having the time to talk with the amazing, the wonderful Dr. Alfiee Breland Noble. So, how are you?
Woo, child. What am I? I'm thinking. I'm drinking coffee and I'm thinking about it, but I am grateful. That's what I am. I am grateful. I am had this thing that I meditated on this morning where I said I'm in a shedding season. I'm gonna post about it later
Mm,
on my IG, but shedding is good because
yeah,
it's allowing you to slough off the stuff that you don't need to carry anymore. And I feel like that's where I am right now, just in a space where I need to let go of some stuff and that I feel
yeah.
lighter. So I'm just grateful. That's what I am today. Thank you for asking.
No, that's cool. That's cool. I need to, yeah. When you post, I'm gonna tap into that. I need, I need to let go of some stuff because I'm heavy. It's a
Listen,
lot. It's heavy.
listen.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you've been here before. We've had, we had conversation before, and obviously we know each other well. And so, for those of you who may not have tapped into the first video, let people know who Dr. Alfie is, and let them know about the AAKOMA Project.
Absolutely. So the AAKOMA Project, I'll start there because that's pretty easy for me. So the AAKOMA Project is a 501c3 nonprofit that I created in 1999. In 1999, it was my research lab. And at the time, I think I was at Michigan State University. I spent a
Hmm.
very brief portion of my career there. And then the vast majority of my career was in academic medicine in departments of psychiatry. And it's funny because I can say now clearly that I never felt academic medicine to be a welcoming place for me as a Black woman. I just
Mm,
never felt comfortable. But I always felt comfortable in my little corner of that world with the AAKOMA Project. And so when we started, the AAKOMA Project stood for African American Knowledge Optimized for Mindfully Healthy Adolescents. And the goal was to think about the range of who we are as Black people, right?
yeah.
The Black diaspora. And it was about trying to understand across different strata, right? We come in
Hmm.
all different shapes, sizes, economic backgrounds, LGBTQ folks, folks with disabilities. We're all Black, but
Right.
nothing that I saw at the time in the field was acknowledging the fullness of who we are. There were a
Hmm.
couple people like Dr. Harriet McAdoo, who was like an
Yeah.
icon in Black psychology. Dr. Linda James Myers, toward an Afrocentric worldview.
Right.
And so I just wanted to take all of that and apply it to supporting Black people at the time, Black young people, and
Hmm.
getting the kind of help that they needed for mental health problems. And so fast forward at this point, 20 some odd years, and it really evolved into we went through, being a behavioral clinical trials type of lab in
Hmm.
psychiatry, very traditional. And then it just evolved into what I wanted it to be, which was a
Mm,
space for anybody who feels marginalized, right? That's why
yeah.
we all put it in all caps, AAKOMA, because it started as an acronym. And now we want it to be symbolic of exactly that symbol that's at the center of our work, that heart. And that heart is
Yeah.
from a Twi African symbol, which means tolerance. But it's tolerance with heart, though. It's not just, yeah, you here, I deal with you, I tolerate you. It's more, I
Right.
welcome you. And that's what the AAKOMA Project is. And that's what we're about. So it's raising consciousness, empowering people, and changing the system all in the space of mental health, because our vision is that every young person, and I would also add not so young, caregivers, communities, everyone deserves the opportunity to live authentically and unapologetically as the best version of who they are. And if you don't have good supports around you for your mental health, it's hard to do that. And so for Dr. Alfiee, who I am is just a person. I was just on a call with somebody earlier, and they were just saying that they find me to be, not only am I knowledgeable, but I'm the person you would want to come have dinner with, right? And just hang out,
Yeah.
kick it.
Yeah.
That's who Dr. Alfiee is, because that's outside of my home when I was a kid. That's what I didn't have. I didn't have a circle
Mm.
where I always felt I could be 100% who I was. I had different circles,
Yeah.
right? And so Dr. Alfiee is about all of this is me. Like I was telling Gammy when I love Gammy from Red Table Talk. When I was talking to her, I was like, look, this is what you get,
Right.
right? And you either gonna deal with it or you not. So that's who Dr. Alfiee is. I want people to see me in the fullness of who I am. And I always want to reflect back to people, which is one of the reasons I adore you, is I want us to be reflections of welcoming each other, right? I see the
Yeah.
humanity in you. I see the beauty in you. I see the brilliance in you. And I hope that you see the same in me. And so my job is to show up as who I am,
Mhm.
to reflect that to you and to receive that from you. So that's Dr. Alfiee, and that's the AAKOMA Project.
No, that's awesome, and you definitely do that. Like, I think it's one thing to have, like, you know all the experiences, like, you've done so much in your career, but also to really want people to be comfortable with these conversations and have these conversations, and feel like they can be authentic in those conversations. And yeah, like, so it's definitely something that's well received, and I can say I appreciate, like, your mentorship, your support, like, all that, like, that you bring in, even just supporting all the things that I've done, and just me as a person. So definitely that does not go unnoticed. So I
Oh,
definitely
thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
absolutely, absolutely. So you talked about a coma, you talked about the things that you all are doing, and the need for spaces for individuals who have been marginalized, continue to be marginalized, to have that space where they can be themselves, learn about themselves, and have these conversations around mental health. And we know there aren't a lot of spaces doing that. So there aren't a lot of places that allow that authenticity and even make it a focus for these marginalized communities. And you all at AAKOMA have made it priority number one,
Yeah.
to do that. And in doing that, you all a couple months ago released the State of Mental Health for Youth of Color report. I have not seen anything like this in this way, like, and it was something that was such a breath of fresh air, like, for the field to have something like this come out. I want you to just take a couple of minutes, like, talk through, like, what made you want to release it, like, how is it so significant and different from the things that we usually see come out of our field about our young people.
100%. So I want to appreciate you and receive all of what you shared about that report, because that report, in a nutshell, is really for me laying down the gauntlet and saying, in direct response to your question, this should have been done a long time ago.
Mm,
This was something that when I started my career, I finished my degree in 97. So when I started my career, however many years ago that was, forever ago, having conversations with people where I would say things like, we really have to think about depression specifically in kids of color. And people would say things back to me like, no, we already know how to treat depression. We already understand depression.
mm,
And I would say, you know, but if we did, we wouldn't have health disparities.
right.
Right. And so it was always this constant struggle within the academic setting to get people to see the gap and the flaws in the data that I was seeing.
Hmm.
And they just didn't want to do it. And so I was like, okay, I feel you. Peace out, deuces. I'll go figure
Right.
it out. So I left. And then for me, this State of Mental Health for Youth of Color was really about saying, can we just have a snapshot? Can we just begin the process of examining mental health in a relatively equitable sample
Hmm.
of kids? In other words, representation around LGBTQIA+, which was probably about 9% of our sample. Representation around young people with disabilities, which was probably about maybe 6 or 5% of our sample. Representation across racial ethnic groups that really heretofore had not necessarily seen themselves reflected in the literature. So if you look, one of the most beautiful graphs in that executive summary that's on our website at AAKOMAproject.org, I know you'll link to it because you're good with all that stuff, is the pie chart that has African American, Latino, Latina, Asian American, Native American, and multiracial as categories. And you see each of those slices hovers around 15 to 20% of the sample of 2,906 young people.
Wow.
And I'd never seen that.
Yeah.
I'd never seen data, right, where we weren't talking about oversampling. And I
Right.
understand why people talk about oversampling, but at the end of the day, I always come back to the same thing. Oversampling is necessary when you need to correct
Yeah.
for issues in the data. But if you start with data that's equitably reflective of populations, you don't have to correct, right?
Right.
And so that was my thing. And the most beautiful, like I said, whenever I share that data, I shared some yesterday at the recently at the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. The most beautiful slide I ever put up is 2 slides. One is that it's 2,906 young people split almost evenly between 13 to
Right.
18 and 18 to 25, 13 to 17, 18 to 25. And then it is the chart with the different racial ethnic groups in one snapshot. So that was the purpose. That's what we did. It was received very favorably. I will be honest to say, I wish it had had an even bigger splash, but I'm gonna tell you, one of the most important things that happened with this data was a vision I had like decades ago, and it
Yeah.
happened. So on World Mental Health Day, on Good Morning America 3, God bless those producers, Janelle and everybody behind the scenes, y'all are awesome.
Yeah.
They put up a graph.
Oh wow.
And at the bottom of the graph, it says source, colon, state of youth of color, mental health, state of mental health and youth of color, the AAKOMA Project.
That's
I
awesome.
screenshot that thing and I was like, that's it right there. That's all.
Exactly.
That's literally almost all I ever wanted. So that's why we did it. That's what it is. And the executive summary is out now. We're going to do some more planning and we're going to have a big full scale report later on. But right now, that's what's there. And I appreciate you saying the kind words about the work.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So I told you, I think I put on Twitter, like as it came out, like I was instantly like, all right, how can I plug this into this presentation, this thing here, right? And you're right, like that pie chart is like even. It's like it's even with that, with that sample. And I know I've never seen anything like that. And like digging through the data, like those, the points and things that you all cover, and you cover a lot.
Yeah.
Like the report covers a lot. Like what are some of like the data highlights like from the report that you want people to know, that you want to share with folks today? And again, we will have the link to the summary in the video, so you'll get to see everything. But what are some of the highlights that you want to share
So
with
for
folks?
me, there are a couple different things. One is being able to have the conversation and reflect on the sheer numbers of young people, Black young people in particular, who reported having attempted suicide or having a
Mhm,
plan, right? I know that that's very important to what you do and the work that you do. And
mhm,
so, looking at the proportion of young people who are Black who talked about having attempted or
mm,
who talked about having a plan, and knowing that that proportion is higher in that population than it was in any of the other populations. That was
yeah,
significant to me. Knowing that about 53% of the young people in our sample reported struggling with uh, moderate to severe depressive symptoms
mm,
in the week prior to when we surveyed them. Knowing that 51% of our young people in that sample talked about struggling with moderate to severe anxiety,
mm,
right? Knowing that fatigue is one of the symptoms that consistently across populations for our sample showed up as being prevalent with relation to, I think it was depression, right?
mhm,
Those are the kinds of stats that give me a reason to look and say that child who's sleeping in class, right? How do we
mhm.
label those kids when they're kids of color? We say they're lazy, right? That
Absolutely.
might not be it at all. that child might be struggling with depression. And knowing that, being able to articulate and say that 18% of the young people in our sample of almost 3,000 kids experienced racial trauma
Mm.
in the prior year, right? That's across all of them. And knowing that for multiracial kids, I'm just, like just
Right.
dropping the ones that really stood out to me. For multiracial kids, out of all the other groups, were the most likely to report that family was the source of racial trauma for them.
Wow.
Family, right? Or knowing that for all of our young people, this won't surprise anybody. For Black young people, it was the police.
Mm.
That was the greatest source of racial trauma for them. So those are the things that when you put them all together, you can have more, I feel like, coherent, cogent, important conversations about the nuances of what our young people are struggling with. Because I honestly would be hard pressed to name any data. You think about the big data sets that we pull data from. I'm not going to
Hmm.
name any of them, right? Where do those data sets talk about racial trauma?
Right.
And how exactly are you supporting kids of color specifically, right? Intersectionally, right? LGBTQ,
Hmm.
kids of color with disabilities. How are we supporting them if we're not looking at racial trauma? Knowing, right, that is a source of stress for our
Hmm.
young people. How do we help them if we don't give them a language for what these experiences are, right? Thinking about things like vicarious trauma, like going all the way back to 2 years ago with the death of George Floyd.
Right.
We all racially traumatized by that because for Black
Absolutely.
people, we like something like that happened to my cousin. Something like
Hmm.
that happened to my brother, right? When we were high school kids, right? And so I don't know how you have these conversations about mental health with it being on the tip of everyone's tongue, but we refuse to acknowledge the things that are unique, right? My family is descended from people who were brought over here in chains in slavery. I know
Hmm.
that my experience as an African American woman is fundamentally different from maybe a Black person whose family immigrated, or from any family of color where their story is an immigration story. There are unique aspects of what it means to immigrate.
Right.
How do we support our young people if we don't have those conversations? So those are some of the stats that jumped out to me. For me, that then gives us real key ideas about where do we intervene and how do we build interventions and what kind of work do we need to be doing to support our young people of diverse backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and in this work and the work that we do, we talk so much in our, in other capacities outside of this one, get to work and interface with people. And the question that I ask them all the time is, you know, how do you know what's happening? Like, do you know what's happening? Right? We have these big data sets that are, all inclusive, which, you know, really lends itself to making like these universal decisions that we think are going to help everybody equally. Like, we'll put one thing in place and it's going to work with everybody. And you don't know what you don't know if you're not incorporating that data equity into your actions. Who are you helping?
Yes. If 70% of the samples, like I would challenge anybody to go just do a Google search and
Mhm.
look at the large data sets, just as you mentioned, that we use to make decisions about funding, right? What kind of research are we going to fund at the federal level? Where are we going to invest dollars? I so commend the Biden Harris administration. I always got to shout out my sister from Howard University and all my HBCUs. And we're going to give love to all the
Absolutely.
HBCUs, especially with this homecoming week. HU, So,
Right.
just knowing that they're paying attention to it and wanting so desperately to be able to sit with them again, right, in the future, repeatedly, just like we did with the event that you put on, right, that you
Mhm.
organized in Black Youth Suicide Prevention, to be able to say just what you said. Here are the things that we don't know, right? So I would
Right.
challenge anybody, go look at the data set and find me a national data set that has more representation than 30% kids of color, and that
Yeah.
does not label those kids of color as other. For
Right.
the life, I will never understand. You hear me say it all the time, nephew. Other is not a racial group. So if we're going to
Exactly.
talk about race, then let's talk about race, right? Let's put these kids in categories where we can understand, and let's not be okay with it's a representative sample.
Mhm.
Okay, but we've spent decades
Right.
understanding these illnesses in one group. Why should we not spend time putting that same level of investment in understanding these issues for other groups? So it's not enough to say 14%, 15% of the US population is Latino, Latina, so 15% of the sample should. No, because that
Absolutely.
15% is not going to give you the richness of diversity of that group. It's Black Latinos, it's Caribbean Latinos, it's Central
Absolutely.
and South American Latinos. That's what you need to understand all of that. And 15% of the sample is not going to give you that. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely commend you all too for highlighting that the issue around our young people with disabilities. Like we got challenged. You mentioned that, event that we had. We brought people together, and we had a a young person from Detroit. She was deaf, and throughout the entire time, she's like, "Well, what are you doing for kids with disabilities?" She's like, "I hear all the things you're doing sounds great, but
yes,
there are layers to this, right?
yes.
Like there are layers to this." And we had our young people sharing experiences, and as we're like learning from them, like there's still so much with that intersectionality that you talked about that we don't do that. We have to do a better job of that. So it's awesome to hear that you guys were thinking about that as you put this together.
Yeah, I couldn't like how you know what I mean. Like I've had enough people call me on the carpet as they should.
Hmm.
I don't feel bad getting corrected. Contrary to
Yeah.
some folks, they think I think I know everything. I don't. I'm
Yeah.
okay being corrected. I'm open to correction, and I think it's important. I remember this a young brother online. He goes by He's on Wheels.
Hmm.
He's African American man. He went to Virginia Tech, I believe, and he's been in a wheelchair. Right, he has that rolling assisted device. I think since he
Uh-huh.
was a little kid, and he was the person who challenged me to think about don't just say people are seen and heard. Everybody can't see with their eyes, and everybody can't hear.
Sure.
So I say seen, heard, and valued. I'm like, oh, but if
Yeah.
he hadn't said that to me, I wouldn't have thought anything of it. That's like when people say you guys. I try to
Yeah.
encourage people. I had somebody call me and a group of people to task on that because they were like, guys is gendered. I was like,
Hmm.
oh. So I said, he was like, say y'all. I was like, works for me because
Right.
I'm from the South. So
Right.
those kinds of things. So I have to sometimes have the help of people to illuminate things for me that are outside of my line of vision for me to get corrected. So I hope what I'm communicating is I don't take full credit for making sure that we pay attention to that intersectionality. It's because people have taken the time and been kind enough to educate
Yeah.
me so I can do better.
Right. But you also have to take it as kindness and not a criticism that you don't implement or apply, because
Yeah.
that's also what happens. We're in these spaces where we're like, you got to do this, this, and this, and it's like they people never heard it. So that's also the other side of
Or they
that
get
too.
mad. They get mad.
Yeah.
I listened to a Pakistani Canadian brother yesterday give a talk. He's a psychiatrist.
Uh-huh.
And he was sharing things like same stuff I heard when I was academic. People that maybe you just shouldn't talk about race so much. Everything is not racism. You know what I'm saying? And that, like this brother's Muslim. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. But it is though. In his
Right.
life, people look
Right.
at him and they make assumptions about him based on their biases, seeing him have brown
Right.
skin and a beard. Do you know what I'm saying? Maybe I
Absolutely.
don't know anything about his family, but if his spouse, if she wore a hijab,
Hmm.
people gonna feel some kind of way about that. So to
Yeah.
say, like you said, to be resistant, to say,
Right.
well, maybe you just shouldn't talk about it so much, but that's my lived experience. Why shouldn't I talk about
Exactly. Exactly. We could do this all day. um, so you put together the report. You got everything out. Like where where do you want it to go from here? Like what do you want people to take away from it? What do you want them to do with the data? Because again, data is actionable, right?
it?
So we have it. We know it. So now that we have some of this, like where do you want people to go with it? How do you want people to use the data from the report?
I want people to use the data to inform their own decision making around policy. I want people to use the data to inform decision making around clinical work. I want people to use that data to inform decision making around future studies. Right? I'm
Mhm.
so tired of reading discussion sections that say future work should look at these issues in
Yep.
minorities. Right?
Yep.
No, you do it. Right?
Right.
Don't put yourself in a position where you have to write that in your discussion section. I feel like one of the things we've demonstrated with the AAKOMA project is it's possible. If you ask people, they will
Mhm.
tell you, but you got to know how to ask. I hope that what people will do with this data is continue to follow it when we put the report out. promote it, share just what you
Yeah.
just did, share the report with people, let people know that this data is there. I hope that students will use it in their work. I had a young lady tell me from that a group of students from North Carolina A&T, Aggie Pride, where my brother went, used that data to inform some discussions they were having with the administration. Use it for that, right? And where we go from here is we continue to make that thing, what is it, bigger, badder, and deafer. That's our goal, is to grow it, right? Is
Yeah.
to continue to iterate on it, is to have an event in the spring where we talk about the full report. We're planning a big event where we're going to put that out there. I want people who don't pay attention to young people of color and their mental health to pay attention. I want academic institutions to pick it up and use it to inform how they teach mental health, how they teach about disparities, but not just the people like you and me who are already into it, the people who said we already know how to treat it. Look at the
Yeah.
data. We use some of the same measures, right?
Hmm.
That are used in NHANES data, that are used in the data that comes out from the CDC, that is like the YBRSS, all
Right.
of that, right? SAMHSA, we use some of the same measures for the express purpose of being able to make those comparisons. That's what I want people to do with the data. But we're going to keep putting it out there. This is an annual thing for us. We have another report that we haven't even put out about social media and kids of color
Oh,
specifically, right? And so this is what we're going to do. And we want, what I fully want, my vision is just like God bless them at ABC for putting it out on Good Morning America.
hmm.
I want everybody using that. I want, when you start talking about the mental health crisis, now you have a whole data set that speaks to it in young people of color. So I want to see it show up in these places where when we're talking about youth mental health, let's talk about all of our youth and their mental health.
Absolutely, absolutely. So definitely looking forward to the full report being released. Looking forward to the next one that you just threw up there as well. We definitely want to we're going to tap into that one as well around social media. Definitely something that people are always asking about when it comes to our kids in particular. And so again, I appreciate your time, your energy, and everything that you bring to these conversations. And so, we'll get you out of here with this, but what's next for Coma? What's next for you? What do you have going on? Like I said, you're always doing something dope. So, like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing coming up?
Definitely to continue to iterate on our strategic plan around those three pillars that I shared: raising consciousness, empowering people, changing the system, to really just continue to grow and operationalize our vision for the AAKOMA Project, my vision for the AAKOMA Project,
Mhm.
by, building our team. We're continuing to build our team. We've gone from one person to two people. Now we're up to 16 members. Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be up to 8. And through that, continue to operationalize things like our Team AAKOMA Youth Leadership and Advisory Group that we work with, to continue to operationalize some of our activities and investments that we've made, both around research specifically, like we've already talked about the report, but also in terms of the partnerships, building
Mhm.
partnerships and engaging in activities with other organizations that share a vision for the diversity necessary, having conversations around the diversity in the space of mental health and ensuring that
Yeah.
everybody has an opportunity to feel seen, heard, and valued. So just globally continuing to do this work around those three pillars, continuing to show up where we can be helpful, continuing to partner with organizations who want to partner, but also, I think more importantly than anything else, to continue driving that bus, driving those conversations around youth of color mental health, and creating a world where every child, every young person, every young adult, every community member has the opportunity to rise, to shine, and to thrive in the space of their mental health.
That's awesome. Well, we can't wait to see it. And again, I appreciate the work that you're doing, the work of a Coma Project. Honored to, be a SME with you all also. So definitely excited to see what comes next. All the links are in the video. We want you to check this out and put it into action. But again, for us at the Black Mental Wellness Lounge, thank you, Dr. Alfiee, for your time, your energy, and your support.
You're so welcome, and keep fighting a good fight, nephew, and keep doing this great work with this lounge and all the other work that you're doing. We see you, we know it's hard, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we'll get out of here and we'll talk to you all again soon.